In 1979, the year was 2122. In 2012, the year was 2093. The director, Ridley Scott, from Alien to Prometheus.
I don't know what anybody was expecting when this film dropped in theaters in 2012. I know personally that I went into it thinking it was going to be another Alien film, and I was really upset that it didn't deliver on that end, and I felt like I was watching something that was supposed to be something else. Now, in the past, I've said you don't watch a movie. You watch the movie that you're watching. You don't watch the movie that you wish they had made. Or, but when all of the advertisement and all of the word of mouth and everything that you hear about it, and let's be honest about something with today's multimedia, with today's websites and movie chat rooms and all kinds of different information that's out there. It's hard not to be aware of a thing, and it's hard not to be influenced by it. That being said, um, I should have had a little bit more of an open mind when I watched Prometheus, because I remember walking out of it thinking that fucking sucked. That was exactly. I was like, "What the fuck was that?" You know, and I was really upset. I was really pissed off because I had been waiting. I respect Ridley Scott as a director, and it was really exciting to know that he was coming back to this franchise that he was a big part of creating back in 1979, some 30 plus years earlier. And there's no other way to say it. I was excited. Um, I didn't see the film for a long time after that until Covenant came out. And we're not going to talk about Covenant at this point, but I will say this, that after seeing Covenant, I fell in love with Prometheus. And I can't tell you why that is until next week when I watch Covenant again, and hopefully it'll all come back to me in that respect. But watching Prometheus again last night, it struck me as an entirely different movie. And it struck me as a very different movie after seeing 79, 86, 92, and then, 97. I I understood the film a little bit better than I did going in. I mean, I don't know if this was the problem with you, but I know that a lot of people I know probably a lot of people went into it as I did, thinking, where are the fucking aliens? When are they coming? When are they coming? And then you see it at the very end, and it's like, well, that's no, this is not right. This is not fair. I came to see an alien movie. Upon watching it again, I realized that this is more of an existential film in a science fiction action setting. There are actual questions being asked here. I don't know if they're questions that I would necessarily ask, but I no, they're definitely not questions that I would ask. I'm not interested in that. But to hear them asked, and to see a story built around them that is compelling, I found I found myself drawn into the film in a way that I hadn't been drawn into 12 years ago, and was only marginally um, pleased in the second viewing after Covenant. This time, the movie meant a hell of a lot more to me. So, that being said, I know your history with this film. You and I saw this film together, ArcLight, in the summer of 2012. I remember that. Um, what is your memory? What do you remember of it? What was your take?
I remember liking a lot of the feel and the look.
Yeah.
Um, and and I also remember even at the time I didn't hate it and I didn't love it, which is kind of how I feel now.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I mean I feel now that I should either like it more or less than I do, um, because I have issues with it, but it's just that Ridley Scott is good and so good that like I find it incredibly watchable and at times very beautiful to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the aspect like um, there's so much of the design that calls back Giger that there's something about it that I like going back to that. I like seeing that engineer astronaut or whatever he's called.
Mm-hmm. I think they call
The
him the space
pilot from
jockey. They call him the space jockey. Is that
the
what?
space jockey. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So um, the to see that um, to see his chair or whatever his seat, um, and then post having seen Jodorowsky's Dune to see this like design, this H.R. Giger design on a mound or on a hill, that is this face that was originally going to be for the Harkonnen, for the villains in Dune, and to see it here, um, it brings back all of that, like what could have been
Mm-hmm.
for Jodorowsky's Dune, and it really shows the trajectory of that influence. Now, to me, I did also come away with a lot of questions. This is definitely a film about questions, but for me, one of the major ones was like, well, what's gained by obviously making this film? There are a bunch of different concerns there, and especially, I mean, obviously,
Sure.
money
Yeah.
for the studio, but for the viewer, it's kind of like, well, what's gained from that the whole process for the whole endeavor? I mean, in Godfather, we gain something from the origin story when we watch part two. Um, we understand the complexities of people's motivations, the characters in this saga. We get to see a father and son protagonists deal with their destinies in parallel in part two, and then that makes um, the prequel aspects of the sequel make the original film all the more powerful. Um, Even in Star Wars, in the Star Wars saga, we gain something. We gain similar understandings of these both literal and symbolic father-son relationships, not in parallel, but in cycles, cyclically, through three-act structures in three trilogies, right? So you have three sets of three films. You get to see repeated plot points becoming, for Star Wars, their destinies at that point. Fates that are basically, they're either going to be embraced or they're going to be fought against. And that tension between the embracing or the pushing back against one's destiny in terms of these plot points that these different characters are making that we all get to see, they add to the tragedy of the villains and the depth of the redemptions when those redemptions happen, right? So and just hearing me say that, we know who I'm talking about for these different characters in Star Wars. um these repeated plot points have more meaning because we, the audiences, we recognize them. We have expectations surrounding them, and we see those grooves, those paths, and it's either like you're going to stay on that track or not, and that's tragedy when the audience can see a character moving towards their doom, but they don't know why. The character doesn't know, and it's his or her own hubris or whatever that leads them there. Here, and this is important too, is I don't know if you asked me on mic or off mic or whatever, but I feel like you probably asked me, or I think that the assumption is that I have seen Covenant.
We talked about that yesterday
Um,
after we talked about Resurrection. I told you my feelings on Prometheus and why I didn't like it originally, which we're going to get
on
into
mic or off?
off mic. off mic, and I said, but for me, I really embraced the movie and kind of fell in love with it after watching Covenant, because Covenant, and I can't tell you why right now because I haven't seen either movie in so long. I mean, I just recently watched Prometheus again last night, but I haven't seen Covenant in 6 or 7 years, so I can't tell you what it was about the film that made this one, um, that made me really embrace it, made me appreciate it. Maybe it was a matter of stepping away from it and going into Covenant without the expectations of what the Alien franchise was. I mean, you hear Alien, you hear this world, you're looking for the xenomorphs. You want to see how that's going to play out. I mean, I don't think I'm mistaken in that regard. But once you have that element removed from it, now you can concentrate more on the film itself. This is a beautiful film to look at. The production design is incredible. It's beautifully shot. There's a lot of either helicopter or drone work here that is beautifully captured in the widescreen 2:35 to 1 ratio. And I think that there's few directors that are able to paint on film the way Ridley Scott does. He really does he really does some kind of weird collaboration between existing worlds and the worlds that he creates within them. That looks like Earth, but it doesn't look like Earth. I don't know where he
Well,
shot.
yeah,
I think he shot in South America or something, right? It's incredible
well,
the
the,
shots he
the
gets.
stuff that I saw, the stuff that I saw looked like Iceland to me.
Was it? I don't know. It might have
The
been
opening
Iceland.
stuff looks like the opening, like
The
the
stuff set in
like
Scotland, the Scotland, because there was a banner that
I
said
know
something
this.
about. Hmm.
There is I think there's a scene like in the Isle of Skye or something like that.
Hmm.
But I remember seeing shots that looked to me like Iceland. The rugged terrain,
Yeah.
the mossy green, that looked like that. But quickly before we even get
I'm
into
sorry, I
that,
started going off on a tangent. So yeah, please.
the reason why I had asked you about having seen Covenant is
Hmm.
because I don't know if previously you had asked me, and so I haven't seen Covenant. I
Hmm.
never saw Covenant. I saw Alien versus Predator, which is fucking ridiculous. But the fact that
Horrible.
I
Yeah.
saw that and not Covenant is that's ridiculous. The fact that.
Yeah.
But so what I'm getting at is that we look at Godfather and we gain,
Hmm.
or at least I feel that we gain something, and I'm pretty sure people will agree with me at least on that one. That we gain a deeper understanding of like the whole saga because of this prequel aspect. Um, with Star Wars, the way it plays out, ultimately, I think even though there's some bumps in terms of the 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 prequels, I think are horrible, but I think in terms of like at least a storyboarded like structure,
Yeah.
you gain something in terms of like what's happening with the characters and how different characters are actually replaying the same mistakes that their ancestors played out, etc.
Yeah.
Here, the question is like, well, we have foreshadowing, which translates as like echoes of the films that came before, but that are actually later in the timeline. Um, and that works the way we understand prequel.
Hmm.
Um, but instead of setting up like these traditions and character like destinies, these plot points to me, it's similar to what the characters were in Aliens, the sequel. Um, to me, they become just kind of like tropes. Um, so that when you have okay, uh, a contaminated, a captain wants a contagious person brought on board, um, and you have a strong female character that contradicts that. Um, we saw that in Alien in the first film, and then now we see it here. But it doesn't feel like to me um, this kind of like history repeating itself, as in history will repeat itself from the prequel onward. It just feels like, check, another fucking trope. Like there's nothing really. It almost feels like, I don't know why, but I felt like I expected something new, even though it's done in a different way because of ultimately the way that that contagious character chooses to be killed. But even further, corporate android betrayer, check, just like the first one. Um, Protagonist pregnancy with an alien, check. It doesn't feel. I don't know if it's because there's a lack of relationship between the characters in the different timelines. Meaning, like, I don't know if it would have meant something. Maybe it would have meant something if the Numi Rapace, if her character was some ancestor of Ripley somehow or something like that, maybe there would be more meaning there because it's like, fuck, like this is, as I said with Star Wars and with Godfather, this is like a destiny type of thing. It's almost like now we're dealing with DNA altering and manufacturing weapons of mass destruction versus dealing with like DNA and destiny and these ideas of like the engineers and blah blah, right? There's none of that, so it's just kind of like, to me it felt like plot points. It felt like plot points that are tropes. So
Yeah.
where do I go from there? It's kind of like, well, again, do we gain anything the way we gain something in Godfather, or are we just kind of following these characters who naively hope to gain something in their pursuit because they're trying to gain something in the story? And like, there's that question.
Yeah.
There's the question, like, if they gain nothing, because in the first one they haven't really, they get close, but each time they get closer and closer, each question that gets answered leads to further questions because they have to go back up to the origin, right? So it's, the point is like, well, what are these things? What is this pyramid structure? Okay, ultimately we find out there's a ship there. Okay, these are pilots. Okay, these are humanoid ancestors to us because the DNA is the same. Okay, where do they come from? Why did they create us? What are these other things? Oh, it looks like they created those things. Oh, they created us. Then they created these things to destroy us because they were going to go to Earth. Why did they change their minds? Okay, so now we're following up this path, but because it's a series of two films, we don't get. It's like, it doesn't even end on a cliffhanger to me. It's just kind of like, it's just an incomplete story. Because, and for me it is because I haven't seen the second one. So
well, that's partly true, but I think life is an incomplete story, you know. So it's like, and I think that might be considered a cop out, but you know, that part of the story is done. She gets out of there. Now she's off to a new adventure. The movie ends where it ends because that part of it has been destroyed. Now she's moving
I
on to a
get
different,
that,
yeah. And
but
this is no critique of your criticism. It's just that I feel that, so like when you're saying, when you're talking about a little bit earlier, you were talking about Numi Rapashi's possible relationship to Sigourney Weaver's character, the Ripley character, how that could have been written in and how it could have had a little bit more weight. I think.
not even that it, not even, sorry, not even that it could have.
Mhm,
I just, it would have had it
mhm.
had that happened. Not that it should have or anything like that. It's just an example of like,
I get
it's
what you're
not what I want.
saying.
I'm
No,
just,
no.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I think the way it plays out right now is it's more of a human story because it's the constant, it's our universal desire, or at least most people, not mine, but and we'll talk a little bit about that in the episode. Um, this desire to know who we are, what we come from, and why we're here, the meaning of life. Um, and I like the fact that you brought up this thing where you ask questions that lead to three more questions, and that leads to three more questions. And that you didn't say that, but you know what I'm talking about, where it's like it
Sure.
just becomes a never ending series. There are no answers. And I think that's one of the fundamental aspects of human existence. Does it mean that you don't ask the questions? No, it means that you continue to ask the questions if that's a driving force in your life. But at the same time, scientifically, and I think science fiction stories, what's beautiful about it is they are both warnings to us about the curiosity of man while at the same time embracing the curiosity of man. We are going to ask these questions. We are going to go search for answers. And many times there is the danger that we will not like what we find out, or what we find out may
Right.
fucking kill us.
Yeah,
And
I mean
yeah,
Prometheus, right? You fuck with the
exactly.
gods
Hmm.
in order to give fire to humans, and you pay for it.
You pay for it dearly. You pay for it
Sure,
dearly. And I'm not sure if
but
Prometheus was Prometheus
we don't
pushing the
need this
rock,
movie
or
for that.
no, but I like the punishment. So Prometheus isn't pushing the rock. Prometheus is the
Sisyphus, yeah,
but Prometheus is the one where, chained to the rock, the buzzard comes, rips out his liver grows back. That's Prometheus, right?
yeah.
Okay. So there's the point I'm saying is it's the punishment, and we will suffer continuously. And what happens? Wayland at this point in the story
Right.
continues to try to weaponize this, continues to seek selfish selfish desires
Well,
for
it's eternal life,
eternal life, which I think is selfish, which I think is
of
very,
course.
I mean, you have to look at existence for what it is. There's this idea that you want to live forever, and what that might actually mean. I think people, especially in these stories, when they talk about people who want to live forever, they never really think it out. There's an episode of The Twilight Zone. I have to go back to it, but there's an episode of The Twilight Zone where they're investigating some bigwig, and the twist is he's been here forever. He can't die. And it was Twilight Zone. It was all the drama and the vagaries of life packed into a 25 minute episode. Um, but the point that I'm trying to make is, with this kind of film, we talked earlier in our discussion about how the law of diminishing returns, and how the series fell off harder and harder and harder, because how many times can you see how many times can you see variations on this same story? And I said that Sigourney Weaver's Ripley was the thing that held it all together. Those first four films would not have worked at all if you didn't have Ripley coming back. I believe that. I stand towards that. This, you could say, well, there's no Ripley here and you're excited about this film. Ripley's there. She hasn't come into the story yet. This is all building towards her. And even her story is somewhat insignificant in the bigger picture of humanity, because eventually, what are they doing in this film? They're trying to bring it back to Earth at some point. They want to understand certain things. They don't know
Well,
it's a xenomorph yet. They
well,
don't know the danger.
the engineers are trying to take it to. They were
Mm-hmm.
even before this story, because this story picks up on the end of that story where it's like they've all, at least in terms of this site on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
the engineers died trying to take this weapon, this creature, to Earth, and to unleash it there.
Yeah.
So it's this creature's been on the trajectory, like trying to get to Earth, or being taken to Earth, like for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
I get like I get these ideas that these ideas are larger than the Ripley story.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I get
No,
that.
I know you do. I know you do. I'm not.
The
Yeah.
No, of course, and the like the idea of eternal life, and I mean the post Anne Rice vampire is an example of like
Sure. Good point. Yeah.
the pitfalls of fucking like immortality. You know what I mean? And how fucking boring that is, and how the loss of value in that. So it's another aspect, and even trying to go back and the relationship with the person who made you what you are, and trying to go back and come to terms with that. Um, from the Jim Jarmusch film of the bored vampire, to to uh, yeah, the Anne Rice stuff. But the idea is like, when I go back to the question of gaining something, it's like, well, even before that, I know that this is a two-part story. So I know that on some level there's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be it's incomplete,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, well, the cliffhanger, the soft cliffhanger, whatever it is, gets you to the next one. But in terms of structurally, this film still, because it's a typical film, it's not an art film.
Mm-hmm.
If it were an art film, then we can get rid of a lot of these expectations, and open it up to, I don't need to feel for the characters because there's a natural distance there. It's a different perspective, blah blah blah. The expectations are different. This is a standard narrative film, that's has deeper meanings, but it's written as a fucking Hollywood entertainment film.
Sure.
Um, so that means it has to have a 3-act fucking structure, because it's standard. It's not pushing it. Um, that means that there has to be, even though we know that there's now a new story going in after she's done whatever she's done here, there has to be some form of resolution here. Um, and I don't feel that, because I feel like so much of what's missing from this story is potentially because I haven't seen it. And so a lot of these questions that even I'm bringing up, I'll have answers for them or not next time.
Yeah.
But it's so dependent on the next film that I don't think it can stand on its own completely. Does that make sense? It's kind of like on one leg.
That's kind of the way I reacted when I saw Covenant later. Um, I think it filled in certain gaps within my own subconscious reading of the film, because I can't for the life of me tell you why I love this film now compared to the way I felt about it when we first saw it on that summer day. And I really did not like the film. I was really upset by it. But I know when I saw Covenant, things made more sense. It made more sense. Maybe it was a little bit more of maybe it was more of the type of thing where I just related to it a little bit better. Things fell into place. Questions were answered. I don't know, but like watching this film, the three structure. This is a lot like. Would you say Empire Strikes Back is an incomplete film that, in a way, follows the 3 act structure while still ending on a cliffhanger? Is it a complete film? Because
I think
it leads into a second
sure,
film, and I
sure
think
it
this
does.
does too.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's I just and Empire Strikes Back. It's kind of like it also ends with like the antagonist
Mm-hmm.
is the one who's like on top, right?
Yeah.
Um, mm, but at the same time, it's the second act of the 3-act structure of the trilogy, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it also has, in hindsight, it has the benefit of that because you know that like you understand that structure. So it's like we start off here, we get to this point. Now it's like, as they say in the story world, is like, okay, at this point, all is lost. All is lost for the protagonist, and then what has to happen next after all is lost is there's no other alternative until you build up towards the climax. There's the climax, and then there's the resolution, and then the thing is over. For Empire Strikes Back is like all is lost type of thing.
Yeah.
If this is a two act, because these are two films, but then I don't know how that fits in with the one that's coming out this year. I don't know if is that prequel or is that after?
Okay, this is gonna fuck you up a little bit, but
do it.
The third prequel, that the third film in this series right here, takes place somewhere.
This year.
Yeah, the one comes out this year. The third film that will be released in theaters and then Hulu this year will take place sometime in the 57 years between Alien and Aliens.
Oh,
that's
so
all
it's
I know.
Not even.
Yeah.
So it jumps. So it goes from Covenant to Alien to this new one, and then Aliens.
And I don't even know when Covenant. I don't remember it. I just don't remember. It's weird that I like a film as much as I do, and I can't remember any. Well, part of it is I'm getting old, but I don't remember. I don't remember the timeline. I know that Fassbender is back, but it's an entirely new cast. Danny McBride, which is actually pretty good at it. I think he's fucking good. I can't remember who else is in it. It's kind of crazy.
Okay.
Well, we're going to get into that next week.
Yeah. Well, so
that's why I kind of wish we had done Prometheus and Covenant as one episode. But I didn't think to do that. We didn't have the time either.
I like going blind. I kind of like going blind because it's either I'm gonna fucking either my foot is in my mouth right now and I know that, or else it's not. But the thing is that this is also how.
Well, this is how you would have seen it in 2012.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and it is how I saw it in 2012. And how I see it now, added the hindsight of it. But the idea is that I get that within this film, there was a setup. Basic story shit. There was a setup. There's fucking conflict. There is that all is lost moment. Fucking for her. The main character, and then climax, and then at this point, okay, she survives, she gets the fucking head, and instead of a cat, it's the fucking head, and now she's off to the next thing. So there is the arc there. Did the character change? She's just basically doubling down on her fucking search because at this point it's like, because everything is lost, there's nowhere else to fucking go than to go further into it, right? But that gets me to the next thing is there are elements of kind of Annihilation here, and I'm kind of sidestepping my main point, which is Annihilation, Alex Garland's Tarkovsky-inspired sci-fi film. Scientist soldiers do stupid things in pursuit of this fucking thing that they're getting towards. This is kind of like that, and that's a separate point, but it under here they fuck around and find out, as the saying goes, right? But the thing is that I'm not.
I'm sorry. You said it so matter of fact, eloquent. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, laugh. Everyone laughed. Um, so that's what happens. But the thing is that, like, this is how it buttresses my main point is that I'm not convinced that I want to find out. Like, they want to find out, and they do. They do fuck around and find out, but they haven't found out completely yet. But I'm not sure. This takes me to the example of Halloween.
Yeah.
And Halloween, Rob Zombie Halloween or John Carpenter Halloween. So the original Alien is John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
Um, this I question, and it's an insult to Ridley Scott completely. But I question, is this whole process, this whole search, this whole quest, this whole idea, fictional, but also in terms of creating the work of art itself and the product itself, because it is a product, is like, is this fucking Rob Zombie's Halloween where to actually like even engage in trying to find out where all this shit comes from, it actually lessens the fucking original artifact.
That was a fear that I had originally as well, and I thought I started thinking about it in rewatching these films and the idea of these films going into production. And I gotta say, you still don't understand the origin. You don't understand why these space jockeys did what they did. You don't understand the point of it, why they wanted to destroy humanity, why they're related, why did they create us. Let's talk about it real quickly from a religious standpoint. Do you view this
Mm-hmm.
as a religious film? Do you view this as a film in
No,
keeping with the questions? Why not?
I think it's a philosophical film. I don't think it's a religious film.
Okay, describe the difference that some people might have with that.
Um, I think because
Well, let me preface that by saying because philosophically, yeah, there's the who, what, where, what, but the religious element is that there is a creator. And that creator
mhm,
is typically seen as God in the way that we are taught from the time that we are young, and some of us double down on that, some
in
of us move away
in
from it, some of it
traditions
becomes insignificant. You go ahead.
in traditions that have that view of that cosmological view. Not all traditions have that. So
Sure.
it's like you can have Indian religions that there is a kind of a belief in deities and gods, but it's not necessarily like the way we think of like this all powerful um, creator that is ultimately like a descendant historically of like sky gods.
Sure.
Um, that got willowed down to like now we're only going to worship one God, and then that God becomes the God that we assume we're talking about when we say God. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Um, so to when Christians, Jews, Muslims say God, um, the, the difference is like, okay, is Jesus included in that or not? But for the most part, it's God the Father, God, this all-knowing thing. To Christians, maybe it's someone with a beard. Muslims are not going to visualize a God. It's just God, and that's how it is. And God created humans. God created everything. Not all religions have that concept of this personified force, transcendent force that has an identity, that has a personality, that has things, visions for how its creation, human creation, should behave and live, and has a relationship with those beings through individuals in history, and tries to guide humans through divine intervention and prophecy and all that. Not all religious traditions have that. Some stuff like religious, cultural, philosophical traditions like Taoism are going to be, it's just more, it's closer to what Lucas did with the Force. It's just this ever present like force, this emanation that all life comes out of the Tao, and the Tao is moving through all things, and either you're in harmony with that or you're not. And when you're not in harmony with that, then that's when stuff is out of balance. And within that, there's that the yin and the yang. So there's dry and there's wet, there's light and there's dark. It's this union of this dance of opposites, and it's not necessarily good and evil. So that's like, okay, first part. In terms of like, I mean, there is a religious component to the philosophical questions that are like, where do we come from? From the earliest times that humans began to, they go back and they find these prehistoric burial sites, and they find flowers, they find offerings, the remnants of those things, and those things look like, to people who study these things, they look like religion, because it looks like now it's not only we're going to bury our dead because they're going to rot and stink, but we're going to now bury them with things that perhaps they can travel with to the afterlife, which reflects kind of ideas about what happens after you die, right? And these things they're built through over time to distinguish between cultures. This is what we believe. This is what we do. This is how we walk. This is how we pray. This is how we, etc. To distinguish between other groups. And it's more complicated than just, I need to make up a story to make sense of the world. I think that's one of the theories about religion that at this point is like 100 years old or more. And I think that's one of the kind of the theories that make sense to people in general, to like people who really don't look at religion or just know basically like whatever they inherited culturally. It's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense that in a world, how does it go? In a mysterious world, people are comforted by stories that they tell themselves so they can make sense out of what they don't understand. That's kind of like the cliche of like why religion exists. And the problem with that kind of concept is that a lot of times the stories that are told within religious traditions are much more complex and unlikely than something like, oh, such and such god blew a kiss at whatever other god, and then that's why you have the wind. Stuff is way more complicated than that, and it makes you wonder, like, it can be. Is it that? Because the shit is like this religious stuff doesn't make sense. These stories don't all make sense. It doesn't make sense of the world. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're way more complex than that, and way more atheist skeptic would say ridiculous. So, okay, is this having gone about all that word vomit that I did, philosophically, the questions, right? What, ontologically, like, what is it to exist? Do we exist? Where do we come from? Where is our place in the universe? And to try to like understand these questions and to look at them, and really break them down and to ponder that. So that's the philosophical component. The religious component is like, well, it's not necessarily just a religious film, because religion, as culture, is much more all encompassing than just where do we come from. Um, it bleeds into all of these other aspects of life in terms and to include how does one live one's life. Um, that's why when science fiction touches on those aspects, the idea is like somehow if we were to really discover, and everyone is on the same page, and it's like there's this full disclosure, there are aliens, fucking whatever. I think a lot of people, or there's some assumption that religion would collapse because now we know that these stories, let's say biblical stories, these stories cannot be true as they exist because now there's this other new component in reality that isn't addressed. And so now this changes everything. And I highly doubt that fucking people would like abandon their religious traditions because now there's this new fucking thing. Like they're not gonna maybe they'll update stuff, but it's cultural and it's deep.
When you put it like that, though, a belief system is very hard to let go of. And I think even with evidence,
but it's more than a belief system. It's more than a belief. Religion is more than belief. Religion
it's belief, but
lifestyle.
It's also culture.
Religion
it's
is culture.
Lifestyle. Yeah,
religion is culture.
Yeah, and that's hard to let go of. That would be very difficult to rid yourself of.
And there are aspects, and this is what Jonathan Z. Smith also talks about, is that when people talk about religion, there's like religion in church or in the temple, and then there's religion in the classroom. Religion, as we normally talk about it, seems to exist like in those spheres. In a sense, it's almost like a construct created by people who study religion, who are looking for those aspects. But it's deeper than just what someone believes. That's kind of like the one layer, and the layer that basically people who believe this, when they have debates with atheists or skeptics, that's the level that they're talking at each other with and saying, well, this is not rational. The atheist will say, this is not rational. Your story is silly. Your mythology is silly. You don't need all of this and that to have ethics because, like, I'm an atheist and I have ethics and I don't believe in this shit and blah, blah, blah. And then the other person is saying, a lot of times they're trying to prove somehow whatever their beliefs are so that they can fit them into this other person's worldview of how, well, look, there has to be some intelligent form of design because look at all of these patterns in nature and mathematical patterns and blah, blah, blah. So they're trying to use scientific language to suit the arguments of the atheist, rationalist, materialist, or whatever. And it's kind of like belief is just one layer. So if there were an aspect to it that dealt with now what happens when you try to merge with the creator, not physically, somehow on some other level, and you start to get into mysticism, which is the idea of it is kind of this pursuit of going back up the stream, like this fucking existential fucking spiritual salmon, where you're trying to like get back to the origin source or whatever. If the stream is time, running from God or running from the transcendent reality, mystics are trying to connect with that reality and live with it. They're trying to basically go back home. The idea is that you've been separated from your origin in terms of being a created human being, and the idea is to return to that. And if you can't do it physically, to do it spiritually, and to do it through constant connection and devotion to that divine source. And sometimes that manifests through sexual metaphor. Sometimes it's Spanish nuns being penetrated by the light of Christ. It has all this other shit. But this takes me to, have you seen Contact?
No.
Have you seen that film?
I know the film,
Contact,
but I haven't seen it.
It's a Carl Sagan book,
Mm-hmm.
scientific guy, that became a film in the 90s. This film is a better film because it's a better filmmaker. But I think that film addresses some of these questions in a way that allows for these questions and that story to stand on its own, and it works without having to be tied to another franchise, being the Alien franchise. Contact is about a scientist who, you haven't seen it, so I'm not going to go into all this shit, but it's basically about this scientist in the SETI program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. She's into she starts off as a ham radio girl, and then now she's into the satellites, the arrays, right? And are there messages coming from space that signal intelligent life? And it's also like her father and the origins of humanity. And there's a billionaire John Hurt who's if I remember correctly, dying and wants to live forever and has all these complex theories, and also does his version of Wayland better than this one. And what happens when she engages in her search? I think that addresses more of the religious questions, more of life after death, and relationships that transcend death. That has maybe more to do with the religious side of it, which is the Egyptian thing, with the ancient Egyptian thing, which is crossing that river to the other side, to the afterlife. It's a fictionalized exercise of that question of, where do we come from? Why? That's why I think it's a short story long. This is more philosophical, and it's a blurry, those are blurry lines, but I don't consider it I don't consider it to have, it has religious implications, but I don't consider it a religious story because I think it's just based on questions as an exercise of the questions versus how does this affect my relationship with the world and my relationship with God, my relationship with those who have come before and after me. Religion being cultural, it's also relationship. This is more academic, I think. That's become fictionalized. Does that make sense?
I think so. I asked the question because so many times a storyline like this would lend itself to people wondering about the religious aspects of it. For some people, it's not as deliberate a difference between those things. I think people get them mixed up. But I was curious. When you start talking about questions of why we're here, who created us, inevitably people go back to religion. That's why I asked the question.
Well, even
I want a clarification on that. No,
but even the leap of that's because you made a leap there. You said who created us. Um, that's that question is now more framed as a religious question potentially than why are we here? Why are we here is a philosophical question. Who created us is not necessarily a philosophical question because it's like you're already assuming that a philosophical. And now I'm. This is just how I'm
Hmm.
viewing it and defining it. But it's like, are we created versus who created us? It's like, are we created, and if so, who or what created us?
But
That's
that's the point that
framed
I'm
as a
saying is that,
philosophical
you know,
question.
because if you
Um,
do ask, were we created, then that means there is
yeah,
the
but it's the framing
possibility
of the
that somebody
question.
created us and they had to have a purpose for creating us, which means,
Right.
you
That
know,
it's. I think it's
you
the
know,
framing. Yeah,
yeah,
it's the framing. Is who created us is already there's already like it's built in that
yeah.
like there is a who,
Well, that's
right?
what a lot of people will ask. It's not a question that bothers me in the sense that it's like I look at a lion on the plains and a lion isn't asking that question. It just exists. Why are we so great as to wonder um, a deeper purpose? The fact of the matter is that, as
Yeah.
far as
Why
I'm
am I here?
concerned, yeah, the fact of the matter is, for me, I ask, why am I here? I don't necessarily ask, why are we here as a species? And why I'm here is not necessarily a predetermined reason. It's the reason that you find for yourself.
I
With
mean, that's the whole existential thing.
that, that's a yeah, that's a different discussion. But what I like is that aside from this being an alien film, an alien creature film, I'm not talking about an alien film. I'm talking about an alien creature, um,
Yeah, the alien as a
sci-fi,
character.
yeah, sci-fi action kind of thing. That you can have a film like this and still have it raise those kind of questions. That you can, it's like a big budget question. It's like a big budget for that question. So it makes it a little bit more exciting. I mean, I think you walk out of a film like this, and if you're really interested in the topic, if you're really paying attention to what is going on in the film, you have to wonder, well, what was the point of that, and what is it saying about us? I don't know what Ridley Scott's philosophical belief system is, but I have to say that he has curiosities, and they're curiosities that make us wonder. I mean, I like the fact that this starts in a cave in a mountainous valley over, well, in a valley, whatever it is, in Scotland, and you're seeing cave paintings that we have seen throughout. Um, we were raised with this kind of thing. If and we're the generation of cable TV, and cable TV means the History Channel, among other, just investigative reporting. You watch this and you see those cave paintings, or those cave paintings in France. You know the one I'm talking about, where they're
Yeah,
hunting
of course, in the
the
Pyrenees,
yeah.
and yeah,
So, but and there is this constant. There are these constant questions of what our ancestors, what primitive man, or what, if that's what you want to call him, primitive man, were doing, and their relationship to either aliens or the gods, because
I mean,
there are
if
supposedly
that's,
paintings out there. Yeah.
I mean, this is all theory. There are also theories that those
Hmm.
paintings are fucking adolescent graffiti,
Yeah.
and most of them are about fucking sex and hunting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
No. Sure. Sure.
and and a lot of them were rediscovered by teenagers, according to that theory. You know what I mean? Like,
It's
through adventurous teenagers who
mhm.
actually went back into the caves.
And
Um,
that's the interesting thing about it. Is that when when do we overcomplicate things, and when do we need to overcomplicate things? That's what I love about this shit, because there's no real answer here, and I don't think Ridley Scott is interested in answering questions. I think he's interested in frustrating and confusing an audience, which is a great thing, because you don't, because at a certain point you have to take a step back from the story that's being told and say, maybe there is just no understanding of it. Either we're not supposed to understand it for some reason, or we are incapable of understanding it.
Of course, yeah.
And
I mean,
that's,
yeah,
and
and
yeah.
then there's also the fucking History Channel Ancient Aliens aspect of it, which is like they do fucking look at fucking prehistoric caveman era fucking artifacts and read into those things. Oh, um, there must have been an intelligent race of extraterrestrial beings that assisted us in creating all of these fucking structures, particularly in Egypt or South America,
Yeah.
that weren't created by white people. Therefore, like they must have needed aliens to fucking help them do it,
Yeah.
versus just math and slaves, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, it can go either way. To me, it goes back to these are great, and we've had this. Usually, I feel like whenever we've had these kind of conversations, the roles are reversed. It's usually me kind of like reveling in the
Mm-hmm.
questions surrounding the film,
Yeah.
and and you kind of saying, "Yeah, that's cool, that's cool, man," but it wasn't handled well in the film. Um, and I feel like this time it's me
Yeah.
being you and you being me,
That's
um,
possible.
because because I'm also like, look, and I like I said, I liked it. I just feel like I should like it more or less. I just feel like it's kind of middle of the road, but it's Ridley Scott, which means it's good.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like those again, I think Contact has those kind of questions and those themes. Obviously, it's not a better film, um, but Blade Runner has some of those concepts and themes, and it is a better film, and it's the same director.
Mm-hmm.
Tying it to the Alien story, I'm like, do I want to fucking know? Do I care if they find out? I kind of don't want to know.
You like the mystery.
I like the mystery
Yeah, me too.
and the pursuit of it. I didn't feel like it was compelling enough because it's still, yeah, the film is bigger than Ripley. It's bigger than Alien. It's deeper, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still fucking using the same like crew, the same fucking tropes. What I talked about in the beginning. That's what kind of like it's still tied to that, and that still kind of makes me compare it to that
But at the same
in a negative
time,
way.
that exists in the world. So how would you get away from it in a story that you're trying to tell? There is the captain, there is the engineer, there is the navigator, there is the you know I think a lot of times we get hooked, we get caught up in the idea of tropes when what we should really be focusing on is how you innovate those tropes.
Okay,
I
well
think
that's the question.
yeah, and I think in the original film
And
Alien, the
are they?
space trucker thing makes it work like that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this time, no. So this time, well, yeah, I agree with you. It is how you innovate or not those tropes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, well, okay, truckers in space, soldiers in space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the third one is prisoners in space.
Yeah,
Uh, then you
we can
get
ignore the fourth
pirates in
one. Yeah,
space.
yeah. Well, badly.
Whether you ignore it or not, it's just fucking. It's another
No, I would say
tactic,
ignore because it's the badly executed one. The first three,
Sure,
really well
but
done.
now it's okay. Now it's scientists in space.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
scientists in space
then
are difficult because that's been done so many times. Um, it's you have to kind of have to sell, but basically it's not scientists in space so much as it's scientists in the alien mythology. So now you have to sell out to the mythology of the world that was created originally, and you're wondering, can Ridley Scott make the pieces fit for something that already exists? That's the real problem with a prequel. Does it fit within? Does it fit logically within the context of what is going to come after it?
I,
And
I
I
don't
think
even
it
think
does to
that's
a
the hard
degree.
part. I don't even think that's the hard part because I think that's you can make it fit, and I think it does fit. That's not even my
Sometimes it's
thing. Is the
very
thing is like,
difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that. If you write yourself into it, Resurrection doesn't do it very well because you kill off a main character. Does cloning really work in that story? I don't know. I don't
well,
think it does.
the problem. Okay, it's harder to go forward than it is to go backwards because all they have to do here is like
Good
talking about engineers.
good point. Good
They're
point. Yeah.
reverse engineering the story.
Yeah.
They're just reverse engineering the story. So it's like,
But you're
okay,
still telling a
now we
story.
just
You're still telling a story. You're just telling it backwards. So instead of
well,
having
you're jumping back in order to move forward. You're not
exactly,
telling it
but
backwards.
you still
Yeah.
have to. But you still have to make those pieces fit. And if something isn't going to logically, you can't do something that is outside of the mythology that you've created.
You
Otherwise,
still
it's
have to
going to be
arrive at an
glaring.
alien, basically.
Yeah, you do.
You still have to, and the alien has to be at least on the periphery of the
Hmm.
story, which it is. The
Yes.
thing is that, and this is like where I'm flying blind, and that my whole argument is based on the fact that I'm also flying blind, which I understand the precariousness of that, you know.
Hmm.
So I get that. But at this point, this is all I have,
Yeah.
and I chose to not watch the other film. And that's I live and die on that hill,
I
whichever one it is.
it's a it's a
But
it's a good argument to make in watching these films.
I mean, yeah, and I think each there would have been benefits to doing either way.
Yeah,
But yeah, obviously we can only do one.
you can only do one. Yeah.
And so to me, it's not even the fact that in making the pieces fit when you go back to do the prequels. It's if the whole process on the one hand is like, well, you're not going to get they're not going to get the answers, the characters. Therefore, we as the audience are not going to get the answers. That means that the difficulty is not in making the pieces fit. It's that there have to remain pieces that are missing, and those missing pieces have to be as metaphors for the fact that this whole thing, this whole pursuit of theirs is flawed and naive as characters. The metaphor is that those pieces of the story that go missing, the answers, they have to fit. The missing pieces have to fit. The holes have to fit into the whole structure of the film in such a way that it's like the Taj Mahal. Supposedly, it has like some, excuse me, it has like some blemish somewhere, but it's purposefully put in so that as a statement that only God can create perfection. Even the most beautiful structure is still imperfect next to the perfection of God's creation. So they do it perfectly. It has to be something similar to that, where it's like the whole in the whole that represents the whole in the structure of the film that represents you're not going to get your answers. That has to be built into the story versus, oh, it's a film that just didn't pay off.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And
And so
you're not gonna have that answer until next week, or at least
I'm
the
not going to
summer.
have it. And the question is like the greater question beyond that is like, do I even fucking want it to pay off? That's what I've been saying this whole time. It's like I don't even know that I want the fucking payoff.
The
I don't even know that I want the journey to the not payoff.
the trouble is when it pays off badly, you can't take that back. When it pays off beautifully, you have Godfather 2.
Well, yeah, right.
That's the gamble.
Those are the extremes.
Yeah.
And then the problem is too, going back to like, should I like it more or hate it more, or dislike it more, because I don't hate it. But it's like, if it's in the middle, it's not good enough. Like, I want it to be horrible, or I want it to be sublime.
Well, I can only say that sometimes you have to sit with a thing. Sometimes you have to
Yeah,
allow it to come back to you and play out again and again in your head. A first viewing, some movies are just not made for a first viewing. This is not a movie that's made for a first viewing. I will say that that sounds very problematic from a marketing standpoint, but I'm not marketing this film. I'm looking at this as pure
sure.
art, and I think as you let it sit with you and you let it marinate, the flavors really do come out, and I think it's a better film because of it. Um, and it's always the film. It's the film that he made. I really like this
Yeah.
film. I don't know that you will. I don't know that you will get the fondness for this film that I have, but it really worked for me, and I really enjoyed watching it again yesterday.
What do you think of the cast? Let's talk about that.
I really dig him. I think Idris Elba is great in it. It's
It's
a
a great
small part.
cast.
It's a great cast. They fit the roles. The
I
arrogance of the scientist. The it works. Charlize Theron is always good, and very good in this. The
I
only
felt this is one thing I
mm,
go ahead.
no, the one thing is Guy Pearce as Wayland. It's good, but when I found out that Ridley Scott's original choice was Max von Sydow, you know,
Oh
where
shit.
my heart goes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I almost didn't want to tell you, but fuck you. I'm going to tell you anyway because
yeah.
you know what? Max von Sydow would have just it would have been on a whole other level.
Yeah, I think Max von Sydow would have. Yeah, that sucks.
He
Um,
brings gravita. He brings power, and it would have been there, and it would have made this film. I like this film a lot, but it would have made this film a hell of a lot better. A hell
I
of a lot
think,
better.
yeah, Max von Sydow would have taken this film to another level
Yeah.
just by himself.
Yeah.
Um, all that means, all that we've seen Max von Sydow in. Um, we've talked about that. You're
Mm-hmm.
carrying in all the roles that you've done before. We're talking about The Exorcist. We're talking about the Seventh Seal.
The Virgin
We're
Spring. We're
talking
talking
about
about Pele. We're talking about all of them.
we're talking about the greatest story ever told.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just uh, just his presence would have given it more of a religious aspect, I think.
Yeah.
Not because he's some kind of religious figure, but because he's played them.
Yeah.
Um, and as audiences, and particularly a so-called Western audience, like, that's going to come into it. And yeah, that would have been on another level. I think it's a great cast. I do think that the cast is less than the sum of its parts, because I don't get relationship.
Hmm.
I felt like it was last week. Well, the episode that came out last week is playing the game for Alien 4 Resurrection, where I'm throwing in this random group of 90s misfit actors to recast the film so that it would be dirtier and, in my opinion, better for my game. And I feel like this is something of and every casting is that. It's just, you're just throwing people together. And sometimes, like you say, in terms of like the soup or the stew or whatever, like, the flavors mix or they don't. I think everyone does well, but I feel like everyone does well kind of on their own. I didn't feel strong relationships in this film. I think the greatest relationship I think that I felt in this film is Michael Fassbender's relationship to Peter O'Toole as Lawrence Arabia.
It's a great. Fassbender, but that's what Fassbender does. Fassbender, it's weird how, of the androids in these films, Ian Holm, Henriksen, Winona Ryder, and now Fassbender, I think Fassbender gives the most distant, subtle performance, and it's what's really interesting about it is that he's not trying to be human. He's the
Right.
only one of the four that has actual contempt for humanity, or maybe not contempt, but he is happier being synthetic. He is happier being a droid. He doesn't envy them. There is no Pinocchio syndrome here.
Well, he also gets to interact with his creators.
Mm-hmm.
This thing that that the characters, or at least the main character, who's all, she's lost her father and all this contact stuff, sea contact.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she has this thing to meet these makers, these engineers, right? Michael Fassbender's character, it's like the perspective, like, no, I've fucking met my engineers. Fuck you. It's more Blade Runner. It's
Well, I think Fassbender is the only one that understands when you meet your maker, when you meet your engineer, you embrace the slave role, and he understands that that's not acceptable for him. He's waiting for Waylon to die. He enjoys that.
well, that's actually something that's interesting about this film in the evolution of the android characters, or the android, like, so-called betrayer characters, is because, like you said, this one doesn't pretend to be human. The next one, because presumably they're getting more and more advanced, they're getting more and more deceptive, right? Because they can blend in better. So, like, by the time you get to Ian Holm, we don't know that he's an android until we do. Then in the next upgrade with fucking Lance Hendrickson, it's like, oh, he's an android, fuck him. And it's like, no. Like, they've gotten so good that now I'm like a good person, if I'm a person. So by the time that we get to Winona Ryder, it's like, no, I'm such a good person that I can be a bad actor in this film. And I can actually be a good person. And I just seem like Winona Ryder versus an android. You know what I mean? And so that to me is interesting, is the way and it'll be interesting to see in the one that comes out this year, since that one you said falls between Alien and Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an android, and how does that portrayal fit or not? You get it? So, like, that'll be interesting. That to me is kind of, that is more exciting to me than and that context to me is more exciting than how did the alien evolve from these fucking, like, urn looking things now to the egg and all this and that. Because I've seen it done badly in Annihilation. I've seen it done not as good because it's not a good a film again, but the themes in Contact. I've seen the prequel done masterfully in Godfather. I've seen the family drama done well in fucking Star Wars, in the big picture, not in terms of every film, because, like, we know that. But even the sense of, like, Charlize Theron's character as the daughter of
Waylon.
And the question is, like, and is she, what if she's not human? What if she's a fucking replicant too? Like,
sure.
She's calling him father, but you know what I mean? That goes back to Rachel, and Tyrell in fucking
Blade Runner.
In Blade Runner. And the fact that she's kind of robotic, kind of stereotypically, like, has masculine qualities, like sexual, but in a mechanical kind of, like, all right, in 10 minutes, basically, let's fuck. The moment with when Idris Elba's character is like, no, we're gonna have our Independence Day shit where we're gonna fucking like torpedo into the fucking um into the alien craft. I felt like I I mean obviously I get that his crew members like did that with him, but it was just kind of like, okay, cool, so we'll just continue our bet in the afterlife. Let's do it. Um it was just
It was
it
a little bit
was
too pat for you.
too e- it was too easy in the script. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like I don't need there to be like Scotty, no, I can't do it, Captain, like Star Trek shit. And then he does it. Um, I just like you're gonna fucking die. Yes, it's for the greater good, but you're gonna fucking die. Um, don't look at the camera, but fuck something, right? So there's that aspect to it, where these little things that I'm picking apart based on what I'm seeing. Um, and I don't know for next week what do I want to see? Um, how far do I want to see them go? You're telling me already that it's a different cast, so that means that something happens between
Mm-hmm.
this film and that film that we don't see. Um, so that'll be interesting. What's the background of this film? What's the how did this happen?
Not really sure. It was the desire to want to go back to that universe for Ridley Scott to want to you got to remember it's 15 years after Resurrection. Um they had been courting Ridley Scott to come back to the series for a long time. He just didn't want to continue it after the films that had been made after Cameron's film, Fincher's film, Junet's film, and his interest was always where do these things come from and why do they exist? He wanted to explore those themes, and finally they let him have it. You know, Ridley Scott's one of the few directors that can actually get a film made. He's one of the few guys that it's like he's as he's damn near as big as any actor he's going to put into a film. Um, but I think those days are over. Uh, there's nobody out there that can open anything anymore. But Ridley Scott was one of the last ones. They wanted him back, and the only way they were going to get him back was to go to a prequel because that's the story he wanted to tell. He's been wanting to tell
Hmm.
something along this line for the last 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. And now he's gotten his chance. I'm really interested in, Covenant, I think, really works. I got to watch it again. And this last film, the problem is Ridley Scott's almost 90 years old, and he just did Napoleon. So I haven't seen that. I don't know, good or bad. I don't know. But Ridley Scott has been solid for, good films and bad films. But Ridley Scott has made solid fucking movies for the last 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really good shit.
Yeah.
Really
Yes.
good. Yeah. So I can't tell you too much about the backstory here. I don't know a lot about the production of this film. All I know is that 20th Century Fox wanted him back, and the way they could get him back was to acquiesce to the story that he wanted to tell. So prequels. I'll do some
Interesting.
research. I'll do some research because now I find it interesting, and I'll have more to say next week. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the black the Ridley Scott that I really it, up to probably Black Hawk Down
Hmm.
is probably when I kind of stopped really liking his work. I
I
mean, I
don't
can
know.
appreciate it, but
I don't know if Matchstick Men came before or after that, but Matchstick Men is one that you really should take a look at. I think The Counselor is underrated.
I've seen The Counselor. Yeah,
I thought The Counselor was very good.
I've seen Kingdom of Heaven. I've seen
I haven't seen Kingdom of Heaven. I haven't
American.
seen Gods and Monsters or no Gods and Exodus. I haven't seen that one.
That one I haven't seen either.
Hmm.
Exodus I haven't seen. I've seen The Martian. I've seen,
Martian, yeah.
but like even like a G.I. Jane, I think there was ensemble there that I think like Black Hawk Down is ensemble that I think I you get a sense of individuals in this group and
Hmm.
leadership and different things happening and that this one just didn't I didn't feel it. Um, I got some of the the production design I got where I'm like, yeah, this is cool. This is to see the giants, to see that
Hmm.
they look like these sculptured, like made of marble, these white skinned like creatures that are supposedly the genetic ancestors of humans. And the idea that this thing is going to be or this being is going to be some benevolent fucking astronaut with all the fucking answers, and it just basically grunts and fucking like starts fucking people up. I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
The the idea that the android can study ancient Indo-European languages and kind of like from there. I mean, that's the Ancient Aliens part is that it's like uh, it's these ancient white people, white fucking aliens that like created everything. And so this android, this blonde android can who interestingly and kind of funny uh the and I think the original writer on this is the writer who did the new Dune
Hmm.
versions.
Okay.
So the a white savior story, um, and then you have the android character obsessed with Lawrence of Arabia,
Hmm.
a white savior story. Um, so basically, okay, there's all that, but I think it's interesting that yeah, he learns the language and he's able to like navigate. He learns to use the equipment, to use the hardware, to interact with the software through this ancient fucking hardware. The design elements were cool. The fact that the buttons were like they looked like hard boiled eggs, deep like out of the shell.
Yeah.
They were like these soft, like squishy gelatin looking buttons that looked like eggs, but they made like noise when you touch them. And then they created this hologram, um, like map of the universe or of galaxies or whatever. And from there, it was like that he was able to pinpoint that Earth was the destination of these things. And it was cool also like to see the different urns, the way they were aligned around this like head, this like Easter Island looking head. Um, and the urns are reminiscent of the eggs and from the first one. Um, so I thought, I did think that that was cool. Um, the two bumbling characters that are scientists that are like, oh, we want to get out of here, but of course it's like, well, yeah, now in this version, R2D2 and C3PO die, and we get to see them die. That was unfulfilling to me because I knew that they were gonna. Even when I first saw it, I knew that they were gonna die in that moment. It's like, yeah, you're fucking stupid.
Some things are no
Um,
surprise though. I mean, some things
right.
the story's
I mean,
gonna, yeah.
and those characters should have died. according to the logic of that world, of
Yeah.
that story. It's like, well, yeah, that's what happens. It was somewhat satisfying to me to see the cocky love interest of the main character, to see him get fucked up, because that's the real, like, such fucking hubris, that you go in there when they take their masks off
Yeah.
in that environment, where they realize that there's breathable air inside underneath, and they take their masks off. You're stupid.
They're fucking up.
You're fucking up. Yeah, you're fucking up. And in this sense, it's kind of like, well, you get what you fucking deserve at that point.
I think we got our title. Fuck around and find out. Ridley Scott's Alien. Ridley Scott's Prometheus. Fuck around and find out.
I'm fucking down. I'm down with that title, because
I love it.
That's what happens. And the I guess the question that I've been asking, and I'll ask it again, is what, if anything, do we find out, and do we care to find that thing out?
We're gonna have to wait till next week to answer that one.
Yeah. This episode, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. It's on you.
This episode goes out to Alan Lamberg. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. Thanks for doing what you do. It helps us do what we do. Buy a coffee, tell a friend, tune in, and watch this.
Have a good one, folks. Bye-bye.